Have you ever walked past a homeless man without looking back? Did you ever wonder if he was once a hero? Someone who once risked his life to save dozens, only to be erased by the very country he served. His name is Malcolm Reed, a former operative from a top-secret Special Forces unit. But on an ordinary afternoon, he was dragged across the pavement, bleeding, and charged like a common criminal. No one knew he had served. No one asked why his military records had disappeared. No one cared, until a young attorney decided not to look away like everyone else. They tried to bury him beneath a lie. But the truth, once it starts to surface, doesn't stop. This isn't just Malcolm's story. This is the story of thousands who served and were discarded. And it's a reminder, sometimes it takes just one person standing up to shake an entire system. Please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to update our latest videos. Eastbrook, 6 a.m. The city was still half asleep. Under a pale grey sky, the first light of day cast down onto dust-covered rooftops, quiet sidewalks, and exposed crumbling brick walls. The sound of cans clinking into a thin plastic bag echoed through the stillness of the street. Malcolm Reed, 62 years old, bent down silently, his calloused hands picking up each empty beer can as if he were performing an old, solemn ritual. A faded khaki jacket covered in dust, worn-out shoes, and a torn backpack slung over one shoulder, these were all he had left. That and a past no one remembered. His frame was tall but slightly hunched, his steps slow. Each time he bent down, his knees cracked. But he never complained, never stopped, never uttered a word of pain. On his sun-worn face were silent scars, stories never told. At the corner of 7th and Maple, he stopped beside a trash bin. Reaching into his pocket, he pulled out half a piece of bread from the day before. He set it gently by the wall and whispered, "Come on out, Bravo." From the shadows between two dumpsters, a small dog with a limp hind leg crept out, sniffed, then slowly began to eat. Malcolm watched it, his eyes softening. "Same time tomorrow, okay?" No one in the neighborhood noticed the man. They passed by him as if he were nothing more than the shadow of a tree, invisible, as though he had never existed. But Malcolm Reed did exist, and he was once a hero. 7:15 a.m., Mason's Mart. A small convenience store wedged between a nail salon and an old watch repair shop. Malcolm stepped inside, nodding slightly in greeting. No one responded. None needed to. He placed $1.37 on the counter, just enough for the cheapest bottled water. "Water," he said softly, his voice deep and raspy from too little use. Behind the counter stood Logan Price, a white man in his 30s, dark circles under his eyes, phone in hand, face flushed red. "I said Friday. It's only the 10th, he yelled into the phone. "I'll take care of it, all right? I gotta hang up." He slammed the phone onto the counter, his eyes locked onto Malcolm. And in that brief moment, all the rage of a man drowning in debt, failure, and powerlessness zeroed in on a single man who simply stood still. Logan stared at the coins, then sneered. "What's this? Beggar money? You think this is a charity?" "Price was the same yesterday," Malcolm replied. "Today's different," Logan snapped, pushing the money back. "Get out. You're making the real customers smell bad." Malcolm said nothing. He bent down to pick up his money, but suddenly Logan grabbed his wrist. A mistake. Something flickered in Malcolm's eyes. Not fear, instinct. The reflex of a man who had survived places no one else had. the brief, hardened glare of someone who had once tracked targets across burning war zones. But Logan didn't recognize it. He shoved Malcolm. Malcolm crashed into the snack rack with a loud thud. Bags of chips scattered across the floor. "Get out of here, you worthless, filthy n—" A young customer in the corner turned, stunned. Seeing the reaction, Logan quickly pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the cops. He attacked me, had a knife, threatened to burn down the place." Malcolm stood. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He simply stood, back straight, eyes no longer downcast. 10 minutes later, 3 police cars arrived, and the wheels of fate began to turn. The sound of sirens tore through the quiet morning. 3 patrol cars screeched to a halt at the curb, tires skidding loudly onto the sidewalk in front of Mason's Mart. Doors swung open. 3 officers stepped out, each wearing a different expression. But at the center was Derek Slater, the unit captain, armored vest strapped tight, hand already resting on the holstered gun at his hip. Flanking him were Eric Rourke, cold and unreadable, and Kyle Benson, younger, his eyes more curious than commanding. Slater lowered his sunglasses, eyeing Logan Price, who stood panting at the store's entrance. "Which guy?" "That one." Logan pointed, caused a scene, threatened to burn the place down. Slater scanned Malcolm, an elderly, thin black man standing in the sunlight, arms relaxed at his sides, unmoving. Slater didn't ask, didn't wait, didn't investigate. He gave a short, deliberate nod. "That him?" "Stay quiet." "I didn't. I said stay quiet." Slater moved in. Malcolm didn't flinch. He knew what was coming. Running meant guilt. Resisting meant condemnation. He only said one sentence, very slowly. "I haven't done anything wrong." But to Slater, those words were defiance. He yanked Malcolm by the shoulder, slamming him to the pavement like a sack of cement. Malcolm's head struck the concrete. Blood began to spill. "Stop resisting," Slater roared, though Malcolm lay motionless. "Does he have a weapon?" Rourke asked. "He will," Slater replied, cold-eyed. Across the street, a young woman, a student, raised her phone, filming. "He didn't do anything," she yelled. "I got it all on video." Kyle Benson turned to her. He rushed across the street, grabbed her wrist, twisted it. The phone slipped to the ground. "Obstructing an investigation is a criminal offense," Benson said flatly, then crushed her phone under his boot. A middle-aged man inside a nearby car had also caught part of the scene on his own device. As he opened the door to speak, Eric Rourke stepped forward. "This is an active scene. Leave or be detained." "This is a public sidewalk," the man said, jaw clenched. "And you have the right to be arrested," Rourke shot back. His hand brushed casually against his holster. The man glanced toward Malcolm, now handcuffed, blood trickling from his temple, and silently drove away. Slater pinned Malcolm against the patrol car. He leaned in and whispered with venom, "I've seen plenty like you. No home, no status, no name worth remembering. You're trash, and trash gets taken out." Malcolm didn't respond. He just opened his eyes, not with fear, but with clarity. Calm, silence. Slater squinted. Something in that look unnerved him, but he shook it off quickly. "Book him. I'll make sure this file's clean down to the last word." The door slammed shut. Malcolm was locked in darkness, blood slowly trailing down his temple. His lips moved, a whisper no one could quite hear. Silent tempest never dies. Far away, someone was still filming from inside a vehicle. With a second device, no one noticed him. Not yet. But that recording would become the spark for everything that was about to unfold. Outside Mason's Mart, 8:09 a.m. The intersection was still jammed with traffic, but no one stopped. No one stepped forward. Malcolm Reed lay sprawled across the sidewalk, his arms twisted behind his back, blood from a wound on his temple slowly dripping down, staining the edge of his ear red. Derek Slater knelt on Malcolm's back, panting like he'd just taken down a dangerous criminal. "Not your business," Slater barked at a bystander filming from a distance. "He didn't do anything. I saw it all," the voice shouted from a car window. Slater didn't even look. He just signaled with his hand. Eric Rourke stepped in, hand resting on his holstered gun. "Delete it. This is my civil right. You've got the right to be cuffed if you stay here." The man swallowed hard and lowered his phone. "Better," Rourke growled. Across the sidewalk, Kyle Benson stared at Malcolm with a trace of hesitation. This man didn't look like a criminal, didn't look dangerous, but orders were orders, and Slater had taken the lead. Benson stepped closer, saying nothing. Slater leaned down beside Malcolm, whispering coldly into his ear, "What are you looking at me like that for? I'm the law here. You're just a shadow." Malcolm said nothing, but his eyes that had seen war, death, betrayal, stayed wide open, unafraid. Slater grabbed Malcolm's hair and slammed his head against the pavement again. "You think you're somebody, just another filthy homeless piece of trash." Still, Malcolm didn't scream, didn't beg. He simply stayed silent, like stone. 5 minutes later, police cruiser. Malcolm was thrown onto the back seat like a sack of rags. The door slammed shut. Slater smirked and got in the front. Another one for the list, solid start to the day. Rourke, next to him, pulled out a cigarette. "What if it doesn't stick?" "It'll stick," Slater said confidently. "I'll write the report. Rourke will back it up. He's not getting out." In the back seat, Malcolm breathed heavily. A thin stream of blood trickled down to his lips. His mouth moved, whispering hoarsely, "Echo 4, Delta Green, Silent Tempest, no one gets left behind. Eastbrook District Police Station, Intake Bay." The car door opened. Malcolm was yanked out, stumbling, barely able to stand, but he didn't fall. As he passed through the jailhouse door, the fluorescent lights caught the bruises on his face. Malcolm looked directly into the ceiling camera, his eyes seeming to say, "I know someone's watching. I won't stay silent." Slater didn't notice the look. He just sneered, "Welcome to my kingdom, Sergeant. No medals here, only mistakes." Meanwhile, a few blocks away, a beat-up old car sat outside a corner cafe. Inside, a man with brown skin and long curly hair rewound and replayed a video clip on his phone. The footage was shaky but clear. Slater slamming Malcolm's head into the concrete, Kyle twisting the young woman's wrist, Rourke threatening the man filming. The man watched the final frames and nodded slightly. "My name is Raphael Quinn," he murmured, "and I just found the story that might change all of Eastbrook. Eastbrook District Police Station, Interrogation Room 3. Malcolm Reed sat upright, his back straight, hands still cuffed. A dried streak of blood marked his temple. A small cut split his lip. But his eyes remained alert, as if everything happening was just a test. And he knew exactly how to pass it. Outside the one-way mirror, Derek Slater approached, holding Malcolm's torn backpack. "Rourke, you know what to do," Slater said, placing the bag on the metal table in the adjacent room. Eric Rourke didn't need to ask. He opened the backpack, checking its contents, a few aluminum cans, a folded piece of paper, and an old photograph. Rourke squinted, then pulled from his pocket a brand-new military-style folding knife. "This is his, as of today," he said, slipping the knife into the side pocket of the backpack, then retrieving an unmarked pill bottle, small white tablets the size of rice grains. Slater smirked, pulling out his phone to take photos from every angle. "We found a weapon and suspected narcotics in the suspect's bag. Log that for me, Rourke." Rourke muttered dryly. "Suspect displayed hostile behavior, threatened the lives of store staff and officers. Requires strict prosecution." Out in the hallway, Marcus Bellamy, Internal Affairs Officer, leaned silently against the corridor wall. He heard the shutter clicks inside. He hadn't been invited in, and he knew why. Upstairs, City Justice Office. A young woman stepped into the office holding a freshly printed case file, hair neatly tied, eyes sharp, a canvas bag on her shoulder packed with case folders. Jasmine Cole, 27, a public defender, had just finished a night shift when she was urgently summoned back. "Jasmine, this one's new. They say it's urgent," the clerk said, handing her the file. Jasmine glanced at the cover. Malcolm Reed, 62 years old, homeless. Charges: resisting arrest, possession of a weapon, possession of controlled substances. She frowned. "All that from a single arrest?" The clerk nodded, hesitant. "Slater's the arresting officer. You know what that means." "All the more reason I need to read this carefully," Jasmine replied, pulling out a chair and opening her laptop. In holding, Malcolm sat on a steel-framed cot, back against the wall. His wrists still throbbed from the prolonged restraint. An officer entered and set down a food tray. Thin soup and bread hard as stone. Malcolm didn't eat. He stared at the tray as if it were part of a psychological game. This wasn't the first time he'd been locked up. But this time was different. This time, they didn't want him alive long enough to speak the truth. Jasmine worked late into the night, poring over the file. Something was off. The police report listed Malcolm's age as approximately 40, but the booking paperwork stated 62. His background was blank. No public records, no insurance, no credit, no recent driver's license. A man erased from the system. She closed her laptop, tapping her finger on the desk. "Who are you, Malcolm Reed?" Early next morning, Marcus Bellamy's apartment. He sat in front of his monitor, rewinding the internal security footage. One segment was missing. A gap. He checked the timestamps. 9 minutes of signal loss, exactly during Malcolm's isolated detention. Bellamy exhaled sharply. "Slater, you're not as careful as I thought." He opened his safe, pulled out a blank USB drive and whispered, "The truth deserves a place. And me? I'm ready to pay the price." Back at Jasmine's office, a new message popped up from an unknown address. "Don't dig into the Reed case. Some things will bury you before you ever file the paperwork." She didn't reply. She just opened Google and typed, "Silent Tempest, Special Forces erased." Search results, nothing, except for one line from an old military blog. "The last survivor of Silent Tempest is no longer in any database, but he's still alive. Eastbrook County Holding Facility, Interrogation Room 6. The air was cold, grey-white light casting down on the metal table. A camera recorded silently from the ceiling corner, clicking steadily. Tick, tick. Like a countdown to a trial yet to come. Jasmine Cole stepped in, holding a thick case file. Malcolm's torn backpack sat next to the table like a discarded, contaminated exhibit. Across from her sat Malcolm Reed, wrist bruises still visible from the cuffs, eyes fixed on the space just beyond Jasmine's shoulder. as if conversing with memory, not a lawyer. "Good morning, Mr. Reed. I'm Jasmine Cole, your appointed public defender," she began, trying to keep her tone gentle but firm. Malcolm said nothing. "I'm here to help, but I need your cooperation." She opened the file and pulled out the detention report. "They say you had a knife and drugs, but eyewitnesses say you caused no disturbance. So, who's lying?" Malcolm remained silent. He looked just like the kind of man Jasmine had represented before, worn down, silent, resigned. But something about him kept her from backing away like she had in other cases. "I served in the military," she tried a new angle. "I'm not an outsider to the system." Malcolm blinked, barely but noticeably. "They say you resisted arrest, that you threatened to burn down the store. But I saw the video. You didn't move, not once. Why let them do it?" Malcolm slowly turned his head and locked eyes with her. For a brief moment, Jasmine felt as if she were being read, completely and without effort. Then he spoke, slow and clear, like a sworn oath. "Sergeant Malcolm Reed, Silent Tempest Task Force. Unit does not exist. Missions leave no trace." Jasmine froze. "Silent Tempest?" "Don't ask again. That's all you need to know if you want to stay alive." Malcolm growled quietly. Jasmine composed herself. "So I'm supposed to let you be convicted on fabricated evidence?" Malcolm turned away. His face resumed its emotionless state. "You can't save me. No one can." Jasmine paused for a long second, then closed the file. "I'll be back. And next time, I hope you decide the truth is worth surviving for." Jasmine's office, late night. She typed Silent Tempest again. Same result, nothing. She tried a new search. Malcolm Reed plus military. Nothing. No records, no service history, no medical file, no valid residence in over 20 years. It was as if someone had scrubbed every trace of him from the system. Jasmine sighed and leaned back in her chair. "A man who doesn't exist. And yet he's sitting right in front of me." She dialed the only person who had ever mentioned cases like this in her legal circles. Harrison Mendez, an old lawyer, once a federal prosecutor before retiring. Next morning, an old cafe on Carver Street. Harrison sipped black coffee, watching Jasmine through thick glasses. "Silent Tempest. You just stepped into a very deep pit. That unit isn't listed in any Pentagon system, only referenced in post-war inquiry reports." "Do you believe it existed?" Jasmine asked. "I do, because I met someone once, a former commander of that unit. But one night his file disappeared. And 3 months later he was found dead. Stroke, they said." Harrison looked at her meaningfully. "Do you even know who you're going up against?" Jasmine answered, "Not yet, but I know I can't turn back now." That night, police station. In a quiet hallway, Marcus Bellamy approached the evidence room. He entered the code, opened the secure drawer, and pulled out a USB drive labeled 451-A. Inside, unedited security footage from Malcolm's arrest. He looked at it, gripping it tight. "I won't let them erase another one." And he walked out of the room like a man carrying a ticking truth bomb. City Justice Office, 4:52 p.m. The afternoon hung heavy over the office. Dim light spilled through the window, casting a pale glow across scattered pages. Jasmine Cole sat alone at her desk, surrounded by incomplete pieces of a puzzle no one wanted solved. Next to her, Malcolm Reed's file, redacted segments, vague identifiers, a biography nearly wiped clean. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, no caller ID. She hesitated, then answered, a man's voice, raspy, steady. If you truly want to help Malcolm Reed, come to the Lighthouse Diner on 7th Street. Bring everything you found, 7 p.m. Don't be late. Who is this? Jasmine asked. But the line was already dead. 7:03 p.m., Lighthouse Diner. The place was nearly empty, just a few elderly patrons nursing watered-down coffee. In the far corner, a man in a baseball cap, face half hidden, raised a hand. Jasmine approached with quiet caution. Raphael Quinn, veteran investigative journalist at the Redwood Sentinel, the man who once brought down a mayor over a corruption scandal. He didn't smile, didn't shake hands. He simply opened a thin folder. Inside, photos, documents, names. This is why I called you. Jasmine looked down. 6 men, all black, all homeless, all veterans, all arrested by the same group of officers who took Malcolm. Same charges, Raphael said. Resisting arrest, illegal weapons, controlled substances, but no witnesses ever saw them resist. No one ever saw them carrying anything illegal. One died in custody. 3 others vanished after sentencing. I thought this was just a wrongful arrest, Jasmine whispered. No, Raphael said, lowering his voice. This is a pattern, a system designed to turn veterans into criminals. And Malcolm Reed isn't the first target. But he might be the last, if you help me expose them. Jasmine stared at the photos, faces lined by hardship, but with eyes that once wore uniform and duty. She clenched her fist. I need stronger proof. Raphael nodded, sliding a yellowed envelope toward her. These are records I salvaged from a failed lawsuit 5 years ago, filed by a former officer who tried to report Slater's unit. The case got buried fast, but if you know how to read it, you'll see it's the same playbook. Later that night, Jasmine's apartment. She spread everything across her table: indictments, autopsy reports, arrest logs. It all seemed disconnected until a pattern emerged. Officer of record, Derek Slater. Backup officer, Eric Rourke. Transport officer, Kyle Benson. Every case centered on those 3. And every victim was a veteran whose military records had conveniently disappeared. This isn't coincidence, Jasmine murmured. She opened her laptop and accessed the interagency database. She typed in the search phrases Raphael had suggested. Veteran disappeared after sentencing. Military discharge erased from record. Eastbrook PD, evidence tampering. One by one, articles vanished. Blog pages were de-indexed. Sources had gone dark, except one, an archived post from the Beacon Watch, a whistleblower platform for veterans. Headline: There's a blacklist in the shadows, and everyone on it once wore the uniform. Jasmine clicked Contact Anonymous Source. A warning flashed. You've just opened the door many before you never walked back out of. Be ready. They won't let you leave this intact. Eastbrook Jail, same time. Marcus Bellamy entered the small chapel tucked behind the detention wing, a forgotten space lit only by a dim bulb above a wooden cross. He opened an old Bible to the middle, placing inside a USB drive labeled with the original body cam footage. Lord, if I can't speak with my voice, let the camera speak for me. He closed the book gently, returning it to the pulpit, and walked away. Eastbrook County Jail, Interrogation Room 3, 9:17 a.m. The air in the room felt thick, like it might ignite with a single wrong breath. Jasmine Cole laid a grainy photo on the table in front of Malcolm Reed. It was clipped from a foreign newspaper dated 2008, a unit of soldiers in a rescue operation. Behind them, a wall of fire. Civilians being carried away from an explosion. At the center, a black soldier, face grim, holding a wounded little girl in his arms. "This is you, isn't it?" Malcolm said nothing. His eyes didn't blink. "I know you were ordered to destroy the evidence. I know you didn't follow that order. And I know that's exactly why they erased you from history." Malcolm closed his eyes. A flash of pain crossed his face. "You should walk away from this case, Ms. Cole, before they do to you what they did to my wife." That sentence struck like thunder. Jasmine gasped softly. "Your wife?" Malcolm opened his eyes. His voice was rough, ragged. "Alicia. She died in a car crash 2 months after I came home. They said the brakes failed. But I've seen enough battlefield sabotage to know when something's been staged." Flashback 2008, outskirts of Kandahar, Afghanistan. Operation Silent Tempest. Malcolm, then a first sergeant, led a special ops unit into a suspected insurgent base. But what they found was a makeshift holding camp filled with civilians, women, children, elderly, all caged, starving, terrified. The command came through the radio: "Burn the camp, clean the site, no survivors." Malcolm froze. In his earpiece, the commander barked, "Read, that's an order." Malcolm's reply shattered the mission. "I don't kill civilians. We're not mercenaries. If you want to bury them, you'll have to go through me first." That night, Malcolm and 2 others evacuated the entire camp under cover of darkness. 3 days later, their unit was disbanded. His 2 comrades vanished. Malcolm was detained for 3 months, then released with a diagnosis of PTSD and a service record wiped clean. Back to present, Jasmine's hands trembled. "Do you still have the evidence?" Malcolm gave a slow nod. "I backed it all up. Photos, reports, mission logs, on a hard drive. Filed under an alias, Samuel Rivers. There's a storage unit I've been paying for since 2009. No one knows but me." Jasmine pulled out her notepad, writing every word. "They're killing off your unit," she said softly. "I just got a report. Another veteran linked to Silent Tempest was found dead in a motel room. Deep lacerations on both wrists." Malcolm's fists clenched. "Nathaniel Brooks," he whispered, "the only one left besides me." "I'll find him," Jasmine promised, "and I'll bring your truth into the light, no matter how many layers they've buried it under. I'll dig them up, one by one." Malcolm looked at her, for the first time since this all began, with eyes that no longer carried just fatigue. "You know something, Ms. Cole? It's been a long time since I trusted anyone. Don't let me be wrong again." That evening, Redwood Sentinel newsroom. Raphael Quinn hunched over his screen, connecting the fragments Jasmine had sent. The map of Eastbrook glowed under red pins, marking disappearances, arrests, all leading back to Slater's unit. He replayed an old voice recording from a confidential source. "There's a list of people who know too much. No one lives long with their name on it." He typed the headline of his next exposé: "The Erased Warriors. R. Eastbrook's veteran arrests the surface of a deeper military cover-up," and clicked save as draft. Not ready to publish, not yet, but the story had already started moving. Eastbrook Law School Library, 10:24 p.m. In a quiet corner of the 3rd floor, Danica Reed, 24, sat alone beneath a mountain of books. She was a second-year law student, one who always chose the night shift because no one asked about family at this hour. Every night blurred into the next until she opened an old journal, her mother's. Alicia Reed's last entries before she died. The faded ink from 16 years ago read, Isaiah, no, Malcolm is still being watched. I can't tell anyone. A strange car has been parked outside the house for 3 days. He told me that if anything happened, I should find someone named Rivers. I don't understand, but I trust him. Danica blinked. She turned the previous page. An old photo slipped out. Her mother standing beside a man in uniform, stern-faced, but eyes quietly warm. The man she had been told to forget. The man the system claimed had abandoned them both. She typed into her laptop, Malcolm Reed plus Samuel Rivers plus Eastbrook veteran. Nothing, until a single article popped up from the Beacon Watch, its headline pulsing like a wound. Wrongfully arrested homeless man, maybe Black Ops veteran erased by government. The image, Malcolm, older, thinner, but unmistakably the same. Danica couldn't look away. Dad, Eastbrook County Jail, visitation room. 2 days later, Jasmine Cole sat on the far side of the glass, reviewing files when the door opened. Danica Reed stepped in. Her hair was tied back, a brown coat draped over her shoulders, and in her arms, the old journal. Her eyes were anxious but unflinching. You're Jasmine Cole? Yes. And you are? Danica, Malcolm Reed's daughter. The room seemed to pause. Jasmine stood, gently grasped Danica's hand. He doesn't know you're alive, and you didn't know he still was. I need to see him. The door opened. Malcolm was led in, wearing a pale grey prison uniform, his steps slow, his gaze weary, until he saw the person waiting. Danica. She said nothing. She simply held up the photo from her coat pocket and placed it on the table. Malcolm stared at it, then looked up. He staggered, nearly collapsing into the chair. Alicia, he whispered. And my daughter. Danica's voice trembled. They told me you were mad, that you abandoned us, that you failed. She set the journal on the table, opened it to one page. One day my daughter will need the truth, and the truth always begins with her father's name. Mom never believed you walked away. She believed you were forced to disappear. Malcolm reached out, his trembling hand brushing hers. I looked for you for years. But everywhere I went, every system I searched, said you didn't exist. Because I was erased with you. In that moment, their hands clasped, tears fell freely. After 16 years, a family buried under lies had found its way back. In the cold walls of a prison. Behind the one-way mirror, Jasmine wiped a tear from her cheek and smiled. Now you've got a reason to fight, Mr. Reed. Malcolm turned to look at her, his eyes no longer tired. Not just for me, for Alicia, and for my daughter. That night, Redwood Sentinel newsroom. Raphael Quinn received a text from Jasmine. She's back. Now we have a family, and a reason to burn the whole system down. He replied with one line, and this time the light will win. 1:46 a.m., Jasmine Cole's apartment, Beechwood District, Eastbrook. The fire alarm shrieked into the stillness of the night. Glass shattered. Thick black smoke slithered out from the living room like a serpent crawling across the ceiling. Jasmine jolted awake, coughing violently. She reached for her phone, blank screen, no signal. On the floor, her filing cabinet had been ransacked. Her laptop smashed. Her hard drive gone. A half-burnt gasoline canister rolled near the desk. Someone had broken in. Not to steal, to erase. She yanked her emergency suitcase from under the bed, unzipped a hidden lining, and pulled out a single flash drive labeled Vault Copy, Read Case. The last surviving backup. She sprinted to the third-floor balcony, climbed over the ledge into the abandoned unit next door, just as her ceiling collapsed into an inferno. Morning, Eastbrook County Jail. Malcolm Reed was reading scripture in his cell when Marcus Bellamy approached silently. His eyes were razor-sharp, but his voice was just low enough to evade the microphones. "They burned her place down." Malcolm stared. "Jasmine's alive. She's smart. But I don't know how long she'll survive without a counter-strike." Marcus glanced over his shoulder, then unfolded a small slip of paper. A blueprint of the evidence room with a marked location. The vault holding the original body cam footage. "I copied the video, but there's no way to smuggle it out through the main gate. There's one place they don't search." He leaned in closer. The chapel, Bible. Book of Isaiah. For the first time in days, Malcolm smiled faintly. Truth still has somewhere left to hide. Same time, Raphael Quinn's office. Raphael was sipping coffee when an envelope slid under his door. No courier, no return address. Inside, a printed still from a security camera the night of the fire. A man in black, baseball cap low, exiting Jasmine's apartment. A handwritten note. "You're next. Stop. Don't think your next article will see the light of day." Raphael exhaled slowly. "You can burn a newspaper, but not the fire in a journalist's chest." He texted Jasmine, "They know, but I know how to hit back. Meet at Safe Point, 3 p.m. 3 p.m. An abandoned warehouse, South Eastbrook." Jasmine, Raphael, and Danica gathered in the dust-filled warehouse. Their faces were weary. Ash still clung to their hair and coats. Raphael unrolled a city map on the table, circling 4 key locations. Jasmine's home, destroyed by fire. Raphael's office, under surveillance. Justice Center, bugged, confirmed earlier. Military Data Center, where Malcolm was once recorded. Now marked, does not exist. Danica stared at the map, her hand trembling. "They don't just want to erase my father. They want to erase my mother, me, and anyone who dares to speak the truth." Jasmine placed the flash drive on the table. "This is what's left. Original body cam footage, photos, backup files from Pinewood and Evergreen Veterans Home. If we release all of it, the system will explode." Raphael nodded. "And after that comes blood." That night, jail chapel. Marcus entered the dim chapel and closed the door behind him. He knelt at the altar, pretending to pray, then carefully opened the old Bible. The book of Isaiah still held the drive. The unedited body cam footage showing Officer Derek Slater planting the knife in Malcolm's backpack. Raw, uncut, unforgivable. Marcus looked up at the wooden cross above. "Forgive me, but this time, I choose the light." He slipped the USB into his inner coat pocket. The overhead camera kept rolling, but no one watching would realize this was the fuse that would blow the whole machine apart. As the 3 exit the warehouse, Danica turns and says, "We have the fire. Now we just need to decide where to light it first." 8:32 a.m. Eastbrook County Courthouse. Outside the courthouse, a quiet crowd had gathered. Not protesters, not journalists, but veterans. Men and women in worn-out uniforms, faded medals pinned to their chests. They came from different states, holding banners. "Veterans are not criminals. We're not forgotten. We were erased on purpose." Jasmine Cole stepped out of an old sedan, a flash drive in her hand containing the original body cam footage. No makeup, no attempt to hide the exhaustion, but in her eyes, sharp as a blade, there was clarity, precision, purpose. Today the truth could no longer be silenced. 9 a.m. Courtroom 4. The air was tight, strung like wire. Malcolm Reed was led inside, no longer lost. Today he wore a modest suit, chosen by Danica. He sat tall, eyes alert, like a man walking into his final stand. Judge Grant Whitaker gave a slight nod. Court is now in session. Jasmine stood, her voice firm and direct. Your Honor, I request to present an unreleased body cam video, secretly preserved by Officer Marcus Bellamy, now filed with our updated evidence submission. Prosecutor Thomas Riley shot up from his seat. Objection. The evidence is inadmissible if it proves you've been defending a fabricated narrative. Jasmine cut in coldly. Whitaker slammed the gavel once. Play the video. The courtroom lights dimmed. The large screen flickered on. The footage trembled slightly. Chest cam view. Malcolm stood at the Mason's Mart counter. Logan Price shouted at him, then shoved him into a rack of chips. The scene jumped. Malcolm now seated on a bench outside, unarmed. Then came Derek Slater, screaming. He slammed Malcolm onto the sidewalk. Blood flowed, no resistance. Then the undeniable moment. Inside the interrogation room, still recording. Slater and Eric Rourke opened Malcolm's backpack. Slater pulled a knife from his own pocket, saying clearly, "This time, make sure we get a fingerprint." Rourke handed over an unmarked pill bottle. Both men laughed. This old man's never getting back up. Silence overtook the room. A veteran in the back wept. Another clenched his fists until his knuckles cracked. Jasmine turned to the judge. Your Honor, this is not an isolated incident. It's part of a systematized cleanup operation. And Malcolm Reed is the first survivor left to speak. No one objected. No one dared. Judge Whitaker sat frozen for a moment, then slowly removed his glasses, glanced down at the case file, and gave a measured nod. His voice was steady, unshaken. Call the next witness. Malcolm Reed. Malcolm rose, stepping out of the shadows like a ghost returned from erasure. He looked at Danica. She smiled, eyes glistening. Then he turned to the stand. The truth was ready to speak. And no one could silence it again. Malcolm Reed stepped up to the witness stand. The air in the courtroom thickened like solid stone. Every eye locked onto him, a 62-year-old man once labeled trash, now the center of a truth finally brought into the light. He placed his hand on the Bible. Judge Grant Whitaker asked, "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" Malcolm looked him straight in the eye. "I've lived for the truth, and I've lost everything because of it. Yes, I swear." Jasmine Cole stepped forward, resting her hand gently on the edge of the stand. "Mr. Reed, please, begin where it all began. The battlefield." Malcolm took a deep breath. His voice was raspy, but each word cut like a blade. 2001, I enlisted in the military. In 2004, I was assigned to Silent Tempest, a unit so covert even Congress didn't know it existed. We wore no insignia, we earned no medals, but the missions were real, clear and brutal. Scene. The courtroom was frozen. A few scribbled notes, but hands were trembling. Malcolm continued, 2008. We were ordered to clean up a refugee camp, civilians, women, children, all labeled security threats according to top command. I asked, is there another way? They said no, and I answered, then I choose what's left, my conscience. A stifled sob escaped from the gallery. Danica, his daughter, gripped her hand so tightly they turned white. Jasmine spoke softly. What happened after that, sir? 3 days later, I was discharged from the unit. They labeled me an internal threat. My military record was erased. My name was erased. There was no record of a Malcolm Reed ever serving. I was no longer a soldier, no longer a citizen. I was a ghost. No one said a word. Judge Whitaker leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. Malcolm continued slowly. I came home. My wife, Alicia, died in a so-called car accident. The brakes were cut. They blamed the driver. My daughter, Danica, was taken away because I was deemed unstable. I lost everything, not because I was weak, but because I refused to kill innocent people. Jasmine asked the final question. Do you have anything you'd like to say to the people here, the ones who once believed you were a threat? Malcolm paused for a long moment. Then he spoke, not loud, not trembling, but like a statement carved in stone. I am not a traitor. I only refuse to stay silent. And if you ask whether I'd do it all again, the answer is every day, every time, without hesitation. A moment of silence. Then, something no one expected happened. Judge Grant Whitaker stood up. The entire courtroom held its breath. He didn't look at Jasmine. He didn't look at the prosecutor. He looked straight at Malcolm. His voice cracked, then rang out like a starting gun. Everyone in this courtroom, please rise. Before you stands a man who was once erased from history. Today we restore that history. One by one people stood, then two, then the entire room. The jury stood. Veterans stood. Attending police officers stood. The court clerk stood. And Danica, trembling, stood. Only one man did not rise, Derek Slater. His neck strained, face flushed red, fists clenched tight, but everyone had turned their backs on him. The entire system he once manipulated was now standing up for the man he had tried to bury. Malcolm wept, not from pain, but because finally he was no longer invisible. After the entire courtroom rose for Malcolm Reed, the atmosphere shifted completely. Eyes that once held doubt now reflected a quiet reverence. And within the gaze of the jury, a deeper truth began to take hold. They had nearly imprisoned an innocent man, and nearly allowed a corrupt system to bury its own crimes. Then, unexpectedly, a key witness broke ranks. Kyle Benson, one of the 3 officers involved in the arrest, took the stand for Malcolm. Under pressure from the FBI and confronted with undeniable body cam footage, Kyle confessed. The incident at Mason's Mart was staged. He revealed that Derek Slater had personally ordered the knife and pills to be planted in Malcolm's backpack, and instructed the team to deal with any potential witnesses. But it didn't end there. Kyle admitted that for over a year, the Slater unit had been given a list of priority targets. Most were homeless, many were veterans, and at the very top of that list was Malcolm Reed. At the same time, the media caught fire. Local outlets exploded with coverage of the trial. A photo of Malcolm on the witness stand, eyes steady, back straight, spread across social media like wildfire. Within hours, hashtags began trending nationwide. Justice for Malcolm, veterans not vagrants. Back in court, Judge Grant Whitaker called for a recess until the following morning to review the new federal evidence. But he made his stance clear. This court will not turn a blind eye to proven misconduct. The trial will proceed. And this time, no one will twist justice under the weight of their title. As the courtroom emptied, Jasmine Cole walked quietly beside Malcolm and Danica. No words were spoken, but in their eyes there was shared understanding. The battle had entered a new phase. A system had begun to collapse, and for the first time in decades, Malcolm Reed, a man once discarded and erased, had forced an entire city to take a long, hard look at itself. The next morning, the courtroom was packed. National media were present. Veterans from across the country had traveled to Eastbrook to witness what many now called a turning point for justice. Justice for those who once served. Malcolm Reed sat quietly at the defense table. Beside him was Jasmine Cole, still holding the same unwavering resolve she'd shown since day one. Danica, his daughter, sat in the front row, no longer burdened by doubt, but filled with pride. Once led to believe her father had abandoned or died, she was now living proof of his long, defiant journey against erasure and injustice. Just as the court prepared to begin, a man in full military dress entered the room. His chest bore weathered medals that caught the morning light. All eyes turned. General Arthur Maddox, former commander of the Strategic Operations Task Force, stepped forward, stopped at the bench, and spoke with clarity. "Your Honor, I request permission to address the court." The room fell silent. General Maddox stood tall, eyes fixed on Malcolm. He declared to the entire courtroom that he was the commanding officer who had received Malcolm Reed's mission report during Operation Silent Tempest. In that report, Malcolm had risked his life to rescue over 20 civilians from a massacre carried out by a rogue mercenary unit. An act in direct defiance of superior orders, but in complete alignment with the values the United States military swore to uphold. General Maddox paused, then said, "I cannot forgive myself for staying silent. Malcolm Reed did not betray his country. We betrayed him." He then handed the judge a sealed file. Inside was the full campaign dossier, a formal nomination for the Medal of Honor, and proof that Malcolm's record had been erased through an internal directive cloaked in secrecy. The system hadn't just denied him, it had wiped away everything he gave. With this new evidence, the U.S. military officially reinstated Malcolm Reed's full service record. Even more, the Medal of Honor, once revoked, was returned to him, along with a statement printed in bold, "The truth cannot be buried forever." The courtroom erupted in emotion, but Malcolm remained seated, his eyes glistening. To him, the real reward wasn't the medal, it was the look in his daughter's eyes. It was the faith of a public that had once turned its back, now calling him by the name he had earned, an honorable soldier. But the truth didn't stop there. As the ceremony of reinstatement unfolded, federal investigators issued an arrest warrant for Derek Slater, the officer who led the effort to falsify records and brutalize the homeless. Slater was handcuffed at the police department and charged with civil rights violations, evidence tampering, wrongful prosecution, and manipulating the justice system. Deputy Chief Eric Rourke was also arrested after internal hard drive records linked him to the scheme. District Attorney Thomas Riley was suspended pending trial for deliberately continuing prosecution despite exculpatory evidence. Police Chief Leonard Graves, after years of covering up misconduct, submitted his resignation. But the Department of Justice confirmed his actions were under active review. The entire machinery once used to bury Malcolm Reed was now being dismantled piece by piece. That morning's headlines told the world everything. Honor restored, system exposed. And beneath it, a photo of Malcolm Reed, once dismissed as human debris, now standing tall in his old uniform, receiving the medal that had been denied to him for nearly 2 decades. After Malcolm Reed was exonerated and his honor restored, public discourse didn't quiet down, it ignited. A wave of justice-seeking swept across the nation on behalf of countless unnamed veterans. Veteran organizations, law students, and independent journalists raised their voices. And at the center of that storm, the very people who had stood with Malcolm began reshaping the system, not through outrage, but through action. Jasmine Cole, following the historic trial, turned down every offer from major law firms. Instead, she announced the founding of a new initiative, the Valor Legal Initiative, a legal fund to protect veterans. This nonprofit would provide free legal services to former service members who had been wrongfully accused, mistreated, or pushed to society's margins. At the press conference, Jasmine said, "Malcolm wasn't an anomaly. He was proof of what the system deliberately chose to forget. We're here to ensure no one has to fight alone again." From a once silenced internal affairs officer, Marcus Bellamy had become a bold new voice in law enforcement. Despite sustaining permanent injuries after being attacked for speaking out, he chose to return to the front lines. Not with a badge, but as an instructor at the Eastbrook Police Academy, where he launched the first ethics course focused on breaking the code of silence. In one of his lectures, Marcus stood before a group of young cadets and said, "I used to stay silent. I used to look the other way. But then I realized, if I don't change, I am the problem." Meanwhile, Raphael Quinn, the relentless investigative journalist who followed Malcolm's case from day one, was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for investigative reporting. But instead of joining a major newsroom, he used the prize money to launch Reveal Force Media, a nonprofit newsroom focused on uncovering abuses of power, especially in law enforcement, prosecution offices, and the prison system. But change didn't happen only in newsrooms, classrooms, or courtrooms. In a quiet southern corner of Eastbrook, a once-abandoned house, Danica's childhood home, now glowed with light every night. Malcolm and his daughter were rebuilding it, wall by wall, brick by brick. To them, it wasn't just a house. It was the first home they were reclaiming after nearly 2 decades of loss. On quiet evenings, the two sat on the porch, painting the fence and telling the stories they never had the courage to speak. Danica shared memories of growing up in foster care and the shame of classmates asking, "Where's your dad?" Malcolm spoke of cold nights in public parks, clutching the torn backpack that held the last remnants of who he used to be. Between two people once severed by war, by lies, and by a broken system, a new thread was being stitched, of trust, understanding, and truth. Because the collapse of a corrupt system isn't enough. What matters more is building something better. A system where people are seen, protected, and never left behind. Malcolm Reed was once erased from history. Now he is helping rewrite it. 1 year after being officially exonerated, Malcolm Reed walked slowly past the street corner where he once lived. No home, no name, no one who knew him. Now the wall he once leaned against to sleep bore a small bronze plaque. On it was a simple inscription: "We saw you, thank you for not staying silent." Malcolm paused, placed his hand on the plaque, and his eyes glimmered with a quiet emotion. Not hatred, not pride, but the serenity of a man finally called by his true name. That day he wore no uniform, no medals. He was dressed in a simple shirt, walking beside a 3-legged dog he had just adopted from a rescue center. Its name was Bravo, the old call sign of the unit he once commanded. That afternoon, Malcolm spoke at the newly opened Eastbrook Community Youth Center. A small room, plastic chairs arranged in a circle. Young faces, many of them once suspended from school, harassed by police, sat listening, though not yet fully trusting. Malcolm stood before them, holding no notes, with no slides to present. He began with the truth of his own life. I was once a soldier, but then I became invisible, called garbage, trampled on while no one spoke up. They erased my name from the system, but there's one thing they couldn't erase: my choices. I chose not to kill civilians. I chose silence to protect my daughter. And in the end, I chose to stand, because if I didn't stand, the truth itself would have stayed buried. A boy in the group asked, "So what is a hero, sir?" Malcolm smiled gently and answered, "A hero isn't someone who wears a uniform. A hero is someone who doesn't stay silent when they see something wrong, even if it costs them their entire life." That day, many of the kids left the center with those words echoing in their minds, not as a slogan, but as a wake-up call, that they too had the right to be seen, to be heard, and to believe in themselves. That evening, Malcolm returned home. In the small kitchen, Danica was preparing dinner. On the table lay a folder from the Department of Defense: the Medal of Honor, a formal decision restoring his honor, and a handwritten letter from General Maddox. "We were wrong, and now we are rewriting history, beginning with your name." Malcolm didn't open it again. He had read it many times. What he needed to hold on to wasn't in the paperwork. It was in the truth that had finally come to light. From someone once called a vagrant, Malcolm had become a symbol of a forgotten generation, of those who had been erased yet rose again with resilience, not for glory, but so that no one else would ever be buried as they once were. Malcolm Reed was no longer a name outside the system. Now he was the man who made the system change. Malcolm Reed was once a name erased from the system, a man the entire city used to ignore, a father stripped of his honor, his family, everything, except one thing: an unbreakable resolve. He didn't need to scream. He didn't seek revenge. He simply stood up. And the truth, once buried deep in darkness, found its way to the light. Malcolm's story is not just about a man being proven innocent. It's a reminder that in a world losing its way, it's often the forgotten ones who can change everything. If this story brought you to tears, if it made you think of someone who was once left behind, share this video, subscribe, hit the bell, because there are still many Malcolm Reeds out there, and we will not let them stay silent forever.